Hello YouTube, this is Genius in Exile, and today I'll be making a small batch of laundry soap. It'll probably be about a 5-pound batch. I have actually just made about 20 pounds in the past month or so, so I'm pretty set on it, but I wanted to do a small batch just to show you. Now here's my list of equipment. I have a digital scale that will measure in ounces, and that's very important when you do your saponification math, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I have my stick blender, very good for this. You actually don't want to use a hand mixer because it will impart too much air into your batch, so this actually will just mix up the oils and the water and the lye nicely. You have your measuring cups, one for your lye, one for your water, and one for your fats if you need it. Have your fat. I'm actually just going to do a lye batch. A lard batch. It's a low sudsing batch. This is a low sudsing oil when it's saponified. That's actually what I want for my laundry. I don't want a bunch of bubbles, like that scene in Brady Bunch where the soap was everywhere. I actually don't want that. You want it to be nice and low suds. That way it doesn't do suds lock in your washing machine and cause you mechanical problems. I have my lye right here. I actually just picked this up at Ace. I have a couple of molds. All I do is I take a little plastic mold and put a little bit of plastic wrap on there. It is a little bit thicker than maybe saran wrap. And here's another box I use. This is actually a Velveeta cheese box. I mentioned to Bear Prepper about using this for small batches. This is just a small batch. I don't know if this is going to hold everything, so I've made another one extra just in case. You have your gloves because you will be working with lye. That is dangerous, and a stainless steel pot. You could actually mix this up in the plastic container, but I have not weighed this. I don't know how much I have. That's important when I do my math, so I'm going to use the pot. And the reason why I specify that this is a stainless steel pot is because you can't use really any other metal. Aluminum will definitely react with it. It will eat away, and you will have soap and aluminum everywhere. Very, very dangerous. So I'm using stainless steel. You can use enamelware, but you have to make sure there are no chips in the enamelware, or you can even use something, thick plastic, but this is what I have for making soap, and I have plastic spoons. You actually cannot use wooden spoons when you make soap because the lye will eat the wood away. It will actually eat it enough to put splinters in your soap, but not actually enough to dissolve them. And once you've used plastic for making your soap, I would really not use it for food anymore. And these are cheap. You can find these at Walmart anywhere, so it's not like you're making a huge investment, And when you use your stainless steel, I actually don't dedicate this to just soap. I just make sure I get every single bit of my soap off. I actually let it cure in the pot when I'm done. I've already dumped it off into the mold. And I'll leave the residue in the pot, let it cure in there, and then I'll chip it away. It's actually what I chipped off from my last batch of the confetti soap. So I'll be adding that at trace once I start making the soap. Now first of all, let's talk about how to make your soap. So many people talk about having a recipe. Well, you have to have this, have to have that. Well, what if you have a recipe for 8 pounds of fat, but you only have 7 pounds? So you need soap. You don't get to make soap because all you have is 7 pounds and you only have an 8-pound recipe. That's not going to do. So I'll show you how to make soap without a recipe by making your own. It's called using a formula. I'm going to use a Sharpie marker so you can actually see what I'm writing. Now what you'll see here is I'm using lard. It's a low suds, as I mentioned before, and that's the only fat I'm going to be using in this batch. The saponification value for this is 0.138. What does that mean? Okay. Now remember I had talked about the scale and how it had measured in ounces, and that's how you're going to do your math. Well, here's where it all comes together. See, kids, math really does apply in real life. So, once you measure out your soap, say you have 10 ounces of soap, just for easy math. So you have 10 ounces, and you actually multiply that by 0.138. When you come up with that number, and I'm really not good at math on the fly, so I'll probably have to get out my calculator. Yes, kids, I know. It'll be 1.38. There we go. She's awake. And then that is actually how many ounces of lye you would need to saponify 10 ounces of lard. See? Easy peasy. So now what I'm going to do is measure out my fat, and then we'll be able to do the rest of the math to find out how much I'll need. Another thing is I want to talk about lye safety. A lot of people say that, lye soap is very dangerous to do. there are simple rules that you've learned in chemistry. You know, even in high school and middle school, you don't put the lye into the water. I'm sorry, you don't put the water into the lye, it will actually explode. But you put the lye into the water, and you kind of do it in a little steady stream, you dump it in, and it will immediately get pretty much to boiling, and it will be very hot, and the fumes are very dangerous. So you don't want to do this in a non-well ventilated area. You want to make sure you have plenty of ventilation, that it's an open area. I'll sometimes even do this outside, but I have my fans on, and I have, you know, a lot of windows open today, so it's not going to be a problem. And plus, it's such a small batch that I won't really be mixing up a large amount. Now, if I do a 20 or 30 pound batch of soap, I'm definitely going to mix this outside. But you want to make sure that all your containers are very dry, because if you pour the lye in here to measure it on your scale, and it hits some water, it could explode. So, well, maybe not if you have a few drops, but you just don't want to risk it. Another thing you want to do is when you put your container on the scale, you want to, if you can see that tare function, what you want to do is basically zero out what the container weighs. That way you can get a more accurate measurement of what you're putting into the container. So you don't want to assume that you're putting in, 5 ounces of lye, and it's actually 4.5, because this weighs, half an ounce. So you want to make sure that you have zeroed out your scale every time you put a container on there. I have a spatula. That is a very important tool. You want to make sure you use that for scraping all of your fat into your pot, and also scraping your soap into your molds. Now, a lot of people like to heat up their oils before they make soap out of them, make sure that their oils and their lye are the exact same temperature. I don't do that, and I've never had a failed batch of soap. What I do is I'll actually soften it up a little bit, because this is very solid at room temperature. But I live in the South, and we actually don't really have a whole lot of cool days unless it's winter time. So I did soften this up a bit so it'll be easier to put into the pot. But when the lye and the water are mixed, they get so hot that they will melt this. This will become liquid when I mix them together, and I'll show you that. And that actually won't be a problem, so you don't need to worry about that. Another thing is water. You'll notice that I have this jug right here actually marked soap, because this is distilled water. You don't want to use tap water, because the minerals in it may react, and you'll get a kind of an ashy residue on the outside of the soap. It's the chlorine and the minerals in regular tap water you just don't want to put in there, especially when you're mixing it with sodium hydroxide. Now, I've had some questions about making soap with ash versus the lye. There is only one thing that separates the ashes, or the lye you make from ashes, and this lye. It's salt. The lye you make from ashes is potassium hydroxide. This is sodium hydroxide. Salt. The reason why it has salt in there, it makes a harder bar. If you make soap with potassium hydroxide, it actually makes more of a liquidy, gooey soap, and that doesn't cut into bars very well. It actually just ends up kind of being like a thick gel, or like gelatin. And you end up just watering it down, and that's what you make your dish soap out of. So depending on your purposes, what you'll need. But I'm going to make hard bars. This is laundry bars, which I'll grate later on and make into laundry soap, and that'll be in another video. So I'm actually using sodium hydroxide. So that's pretty much my list of materials. Showed you how to do the math. I'm going to measure how much fat I have and see how much lye I have, and then I'll be back in the next video. Thank you.